What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Air Jordan 38 Low, and I'll bet right around now you're wondering to yourself, if it's the same mid and outsole as the 38s, why did he cut them open? That's because I don't trust any company's website that gives any stats or information on any shoe anymore after this year, so that's why. Let's get into them. Now, getting into the uppers of the 38 Low, yeah, I mean, there are some differences from the Air Jordan 38. What I found really interesting about the 38 Lows was, number one, the meshing on the medial and lateral side, but then being backed up by this really strong, almost neoprene material that goes all the way through the tongue. Now, I really like this material because it's not super bulky, but it also protects your foot against the shoelaces, so you can really crank down on them and not get a lot of like nerve pain, neuritis, any of those irritating pains. Now, going posterior into the ankle collar of the shoe, you get this really chunky stitching, and the reason I like this on shoes a lot of times is because it prevents some micro motion from your sock and your shoe. It's not gonna be a ton, right? But if you're someone that's prone to slipping and sliding in your shoe, and you're like, oh, I double sock, I wear thicker socks, I still move around, a stitching like this creates a little bit more friction back there, and will just grab a little more, especially if you're getting one-to-one, that, maybe if you had issues in the past with something like this, you may not. Now, if you look at this setup on the breathability test, heated up 122.4 degrees, which if you look at the breathability mapping of them too, I think that tells a little bit of a different story. The fog is just pouring out of the tongue like crazy because those holes are so big. The thing is there's a lot of spots on the shoe that can also hold on to some heat. Number one, the giant insole, which we'll talk about in the fit section, there's a whole other issue there. But number two, I think the neoprene too, it's so dense it can hold on to some heat. Plus, the fact that this meshing is then backed up against the neoprene, there's no breathability there. So you are getting breathability, just not in the places you think you are. And moving into the part of the shoe that doesn't breathe at all, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, on that synthetic leather, yeah, I mean, the burr does start to rip through it pretty good. Now, you also have part of the X plate over there that should protect it okay, but you do have some file on there, and then that. So I'd say on an outdoor court, honestly, I'd probably worry about, if you're a super everter, I'd be worried about ripping through the weave here first, but although it might look a little weird, I think the integrity should still be pretty good because it is just really enveloped, with the synthetic leather. And then if this is real nubuck or synthetic nubuck, whatever, but you have a lot of layers between you and the ground, put it that way. The one other thing about the uppers I do want to make mention of is that, yeah, I mean, the ankle collar on these is not as high as the 38s, but it is pretty close. But the rear foot of this shoe with the reinforcement over here, I thought was really outstanding in terms of stability. I actually felt more stable in these than I did in the 38s. The lace line is pretty chunky. It does need a lot of break-in. But because that neoprene-like material is so dense, you can kind of crank down on them. Like I said, I think as long as you're fitting one-to-one in them, the rear foot of this shoe is actually really darn good for containment as well as stability. But getting into the midsole teardown, the first thing you're going to want to tear down is the insole, which I'll just get to in the fit section. I got a whole thing about that. But anyway, if you get into the actual midsole, yeah, it is a full-length Zoom Strobel unit, followed by a full bed of Cushlon 3.0 and then Phylon Carrier, which really is just a super comfortable setup when the insole is taken out. But it is a super comfortable setup. It also feels really, really good in terms of pivoting and push-off power because of the X-plate. Now, that X-plate is only in the forefoot, basically, right? It does ride up the sides of the shoe. However, for the shank score, it only gets 0.1 because there's a presence of a shank. It is not double thickness. It does not cross any zones except for on the lateral medial side. That does not count unless it crosses zones on the plantar side of the shoe. However, people that are playing up on the balls of their foot, kind of like, the Tatum 1s were designed for, I honestly think this is like a better version of the Tatum 1 because you get the stability when you're up on the balls of your foot, but then also the containment on the medial and lateral side. Remember, medial containment in basketball, to me, sometimes is just as important as lateral containment, because if you can't push off medially, then how are you going to cook a defender? How are you going to create space for yourself, right? So, the medial side is kind of like the start of the move. The lateral side is kind of like the finishing part of the move. And on the bounce height test, really no surprise, 37.5 centimeters in the heel, 41 centimeters in the forefoot. Zoom Strobel is not as bouncy right to that ball bearing as individual Zoom air units. However, Cushlon 3.0 with like that rubberized element of it does give a pretty good amount of bounce. It also gives a really nice feeling underfoot. A lot of times when I'm wearing these shoes, I always wonder, is that easy bouncy feeling in these shoes the Zoom Strobel unit, or is a lot of it the Cushlon 3.0? So whatever it is, especially on foot, it does feel very bouncy. It doesn't feel like a super violently bouncy shoe, right? It doesn't have that diving board effect on it like some shoes do with a Pebex midsole or a full-length shank, but it does give that squishy, elastic bounce feeling without like feeling you're bottoming through the shoe. And looking at the outsole tread, it's that same quasi delta and herringbone pattern that is capped by rubber on the lateral side. You also get these solid pieces of rubber where the X plate is. I'm always waiting for my lead foot to slip out from underneath of me on those solid pieces of rubber, but I never do. It might be because they have these like big macro cutouts, these triangular cutouts right there as well. However, if you look at it on the grip test ramp, 45 degrees where it's slipped at, which is pretty darn good. The funny thing is I had to run out to my car from the gym and I forgot I had these on, and I got these shoes incredibly salty and just really just tore them up. And I came back in, I really had no issues with them. I kind of just wiped them off real quick just with my shirt, and zero issues with grip there either. So these do have very easy grip on them. I will say though, just looking at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, I mean, about 1 millimeter of damage on this. The thing is though, is these are very narrow treads. So once you start wearing them down, I think you're gonna start to accelerate, you know, the tread loss or the traction loss, I would say, in these. So I'd say don't do it like me, keep them new, keep them on indoor courts, and you should get really good traction for the life of the shoe, even in really dusty or salty conditions. And really when I was describing the midsole as having that really easy bouncy feeling, right? It's the same with the speed, right? They just have easy up and down speed. They have really easy side to side speed because the shoe is just very unencumbering. So look at the speed ratio, 2.61, shank score of 0.1 brings it up to a 2.71. I think that's really where they belong. I think it's the longevity of the midsole that you're gonna have to worry about in terms of speed. When these things are new, they just, like I said, they feel like a breeze under your foot. They just feel very unencumbering, very easy to get up and down the court and very easy to get up and down off the ground. It's just that because the shank only is in the forefoot and it's only containing laterally, you know, what happens to that Cushlon and Zoom Strobel over time. So I think these are gonna lose speed and lose bounce, like I said, over time. Maybe easier than something that has a plantar shank. We'll talk about in the fit section what orthotics can do for that, but when they're new, they're great. All right, but speaking of the longevity of the midsole and the speed and the bounce, let's talk about the fit and the insole. Now, I hardly ever talk about insoles on this channel because I usually just think these things are like nothing, you know, they don't really bring anything to the shoe. This one, however, does bring a lot to the shoe and not in great ways. So number one, it is a super deep heel cupped insole. Now, that is going to artificially push you up into the shoe. Number two, it has a pretty artificial arch in there too, right? You just push it down, but it's up there. Now, combining that with the shoe, this can be really annoying in the shoe, right? Because it pushes you forward and that arch can dig into you. I have pretty wide arches on my foot, right? And if you're anything but someone that really contours this, like more of a narrow-heeled, narrow mid-footed person, this is just gonna start to dig in. So once I took this out, I mean, I just put a flat one in here and it just felt fine. It's just this makes the shoe not feel comfortable. So just watch out for it, take it out, put something else in. The problem with taking this out is because it's super deep heel cupped and it has a little bit of thickness to it, it's pushing you forward in the shoe. That also means the shoe is a little bit longer. This thing is 29.1 centimeters for my men's size 11. Its width is pretty standard. So if you are somebody that is a narrow or medium foot, you probably can go down a half size unless you are long-toed, right? If you have really long toes, I just go true to size. A 2E for me, I'd just be going true to size on these. A 4E, if you're short-toed, I think this might be a mismatch for you. If you have long feet, long toes, it really doesn't matter. You know, it's narrow, medium, go true to size. A 2E then could go true or up 1/2 size. A 4E could then go up its 1.5 or 1 size. The thing about these is if you have anything on the lateral side of your foot tailor's bunion, prominent styloid, whatever. These are just probably going to be a mismatch for you because that X plate is just not going to break in. So if you have a really sharp C-shaped foot or anything like that, like I said, you just might want to look somewhere else. But if you are somebody with heel pain, ball of foot pain, Achilles tendonitis, PT tendonitis, peroneal tendonitis, whatever, these things with an orthotic are really darn good just because, like I said, the ankle collar does keep you nice and secure back there. And I think with an orthotic, you will shield that Cushlon, you will shield the Zoom strobel unit a little bit. Yeah, you won't feel it underfoot, but you'll still be getting the benefits of it. Even with a bulky orthotic, these still will lock down the ankle collar pretty well for you. I had a hard time getting these things off, especially once that Cushlon breaks in just a little bit. That's when you get to that sweet spot before it really starts to bottom. So like I said, it's a niche fit shoe, but with the proper insole in there, pretty good for most things. And so talking about the playability, yeah, I mean, I liked them pretty much as I liked the 38s. I thought that these were just a little bit more secure in the ankle collar, maybe a little bit more confidence inducing on the court. Although that the 38s had decent security in them as well, I just think that the 38 lows, just a little bit more. They just feel a little bit more substantial on foot without being super bottom heavy. A lot of times when you get the low version of a shoe or the second version or a takedown of the shoe, not that this is a takedown, but anytime you get one of those and the materials change, sometimes they can feel a little bit cheaper to me, or just like it doesn't work with the shoe because it wasn't designed for this type of profile. Whereas in the 38 low, it just feels like this was a profile of shoe with the materials in it. It just works really well. Like I said, easy speed, easy pop up off the ground, and very nimble for how substantial they are. I really think anybody from a more shifty small guard up to a big can really find something like in these. If you are a big, like I said, probably would be putting an orthotic in these so you don't just pummel through them in a month or two. So just watch out for that. But the tools in them really, I think, do fit across the board as long as you kind of augment them the way you should. So love to hear your thoughts on the 38 lows. You know, I had a really pleasant play test in these. Honestly, the 38s and the 38 lows were really a nice refresh from the 37s. So hopefully the 39s when they come out, just as good. So if you do want to see the older sibling to the 38 lows, the Jordan 38 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.